Hey everyone, this is Nick from Mossy Creek Fly Fishing. Today I'm going to be tying a variation of Chuck Kraft's Crittermite, as you can see here, using some really cool material that gives it a little bit of life. This is one of our favorite flies that we use throughout the summer. It is an imitation of a hellgrammite, which is the nymph of a Dobson fly, a really productive fly for us in the summer. I'm using this TMC5263 hook. It's a pretty standard streamer hook, 3X long, and the label's not on there, but that is flat wax nylon, 210 denier, and black. It's a thread that I use for pretty much all of my streamers. It coats stuff really well. It's flat. It's easy to cover the hook well and quick. So right here, I'm just going to go ahead and cover that hook up with a bunch of thread. I'm going to grab my eye. For that eye, we're using the Hareline double pupil lead eye. This is a size 4 that I'm tying, so I'm using the large. I like my flies a little bit on the heavier side, especially when you're fishing those quick runs. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going to take some figure-8 wraps, lock that in, then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use a lot of thread just to make sure that I get these eyes right where I want them. So taking a bunch of thread wraps, I'm pulling pretty tight. Nice thing about this flat wax, you can put a decent bit of pressure on there and just locking those eyes in right there. Leaving a little bit of room for the head. You'll see kind of what we work with at the end. So I'm using a woolly critter brush. This is a brush from EP that we carry. It's a really cool brush, has some rubber legs in it, which adds some cool life to the fly. I'm tying that right in the back here. We're going to end up using a Eastern Trophies tail, which I'll show you here in a little bit. But before we put that tail on, this is what we're going to use to kind of build up a body along that fly. So this is a brush. I get that tied in, and I'm just going to palmer this thing up the hook. Spacing, a decent bit. A lot of this is going to get covered up by the tail, and it's so long that it doesn't really need to be perfect. If you have a little bit of space in there, you're not going to see it. Kind of doing my best just to keep too much of the fibers from getting trapped, but I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it because you'll see it kind of fluffs out really well and hides a lot of imperfections. So I'm going to take that all the way up to that eye. I'm going to trap that little bit that I have left on both sides, make sure I have it in really nice before I come in and cut it. Snip that wire there. After I snip that wire, I'm going to give it a couple more wraps just to make sure I have everything in there. So you can see how that makes that really cool buggy body there. Before I move on, I like to come in with my bodkin. A lot of times there are some trap fibers, and if you just go through and pick at it a little bit, you can get a little bit out of there. It just makes it look a little better. So there we have that. In a little bit, I'm going to come in with that tail I was talking about, and it's going to cover up the bottom of that fly. So I actually come in here with my scissors, and I trim straight across the hook. Like I said, not getting too detailed, but just enough where I make that a little bit flatter for where that tail's coming in. So I'll go ahead and pop that tail on. These are Eastern Trophies Crittermite tails. We carry them in a bunch of different styles of flies, but for this Crittermite, it's one of the best tails, and it's an ultra suede material. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but it's got a little hole there. That hole is for the point of the hook. So we're going to pop that on. To get it all the way on the hook, got to take it out of the vise, slide it around the bend. Then I'm going to get my hook back there. So you'll see the tail's got the end, that little pincher looking thing is going to be the back of the fly. And then you'll see this long skinny part. That right there is actually going to be for us tying this tail into the fly. So as I come in here, I'm going to kind of pull that down and be tying it in there. But before we do that, I've got a couple steps I like to put here on the head just to cover it up and build a little bulk there at the head. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add some rubber legs in here. Not a lot. If you look at an actual hellgrammite, They don't have these huge long legs, but it does add like a nice little profile. This is round rubber. I usually cut a chunk about the length I want first, and then I just kind of pluck off the rubber as we go. When you're putting in one piece of rubber, a great way to do this is I'm going to come here with the thread and fold that rubber in half, and I can take that thread, pull it tight, and it really helps me to place where I want that rubber to go. So you'll notice I'm actually putting it there below the eyes. As I bring that tail back here in a little bit, it's going to let me lay this rubber in place a little bit more where I want to. So right now I'm not paying too much attention, just getting good wraps and making sure that I get that trapped in. So if I flip that fly up, you'll see they look a little bit unruly right now, but when we pull that in tight, it's going to fix that. Now the last step before we start pulling that tail is I'm going to take a little bit of sparkle yarn. This is a material that we carry. It's just kind of a nice yarn. It's braided. I like to come in here and pull it apart and just get one strand. I find it a little bit easier to work with. It doesn't build up too much bulk. I'm going to tie that in right behind those eyes, and I'm going to advance my thread up where I'm going to tie that off. So if you look at that fly, that little bit of open space where the eyes are on there, basically just using this material to fill in some of that space. So I'll wrap it around a couple different ways, figure eight it across those eyes, just building up a little bit of the bulk. You just kind of eyeball it to see what I like. And then I'm going to come all the way in front of the eyes. I'm going to give that just a wrap or two, and then I'm going to trap it with my thread. A couple turns like that. I can come in here, snip that clean, hold that rubber back if I need to, and pull that down. Really nice, okay? So before we come up and we finish the fly, we're gonna flip back. We're gonna look back at the bottom of the fly here. And what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be pulling that little tab that I was telling you guys about earlier, nice and tight to the fly, and we're gonna tie it in like that. So I'm gonna flip it up so I can see. I like to pull this nice and taut so that I can actually get that material pulled down nice. I'm gonna kind of pinch everything together, and I'm gonna start with just a few loose wraps, and I'm gonna come through and pull that suede material. It stretches a little bit so you can actually get it really tight. You'll notice it's gonna look a little bit like that, and then I can come in here and I can snip the head of that. At this point, I'll come through, I'll grab those rubber legs that I was dealing with, and I'll kind of slide them into place. I like them just folding off the fly like that a little bit. I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna trim them somewhat close. Like I said, if you look at a Crittermite, or sorry, an actual hellgrammite, they don't have these crazy long legs off, so it's just a little bit of profile that we're adding there. Like I said, I don't pay too much attention to that being perfect. Once you start fishing it, it moves around anyway, and you're gonna see we have this nice profile. So the last step that I like to do is I will add like a little bit of pincher with that same rubber leg. I'm gonna pull off one strand of that. I'm gonna use that same technique, fold it over. I'm gonna pull it down right on top of the hook. I'm gonna make a couple thread wraps just to hold it in place. It doesn't really look like I want it yet. So what I do is I actually take the hand that I would normally hold my thread with, and I'm gonna hold that rubber where I want it to be. And I'm gonna come through and I'm just gonna make a couple loose wraps with my thread, pull it tight, and make sure that I have those little pinchers coming right off the end of the fly like that. That rubber looks kind of crazy, so I can come in here, use that thick flat wax to cover it up. And then I'm just gonna build a little thread dam and basically just cover up that rubber, and then also taper this little nose of the fly so that it blends into the eyes nice and smooth. Get it just like I want to, and then I'm going to come in here, I'm going to throw a whip finish on. Just like that. Before I finish it off, I'm going to take just a little bit of head cement, dip my bodkin in it, and just coat those thread wraps. Usually just a couple drips is all it takes, and that really is going to help with the life of that fly and getting more than just a couple fish out of it. So there it is, variation of Chuck's Crittermite. That material, you can use all kinds of stuff. You can use chenille, you can use estaz, really any like corded material for the body, but I think that woolly critter brush makes a nice buggy look to that fly.